She was covered in scales, until the human reached for her hand. The sky above the alien planet was dark green, filled with slow-moving clouds that glowed from the inside. Strange birds flew in circles, and the wind carried a humming sound that echoed across the trees. Commander Cade walked carefully through the tall silver grass. His boots crunched on the dry ground. He was part of a small human exploration team sent to search the ruins of this forgotten planet. The locals called it Xarian, but no one really knew what used to live here. Cade had a sharp mind and a kind heart. He wasn't like the other soldiers. He didn't shoot first. He listened. Behind him, his partner Mira checked her scanner. "There's movement ahead," she said. "Something alive." Cade nodded. "Let's go slow." They moved quietly toward the ruined stone walls. Vines had wrapped around every broken tower. The buildings looked like temples, but not for worship, for something else, something powerful. Suddenly, Mira gasped. "Look!" Cade turned and saw her, a girl, barely more than a teenager, hiding behind a half-broken pillar. Her skin shimmered like metal. Gold, blue, and red scales rippled across her arms and face. Her eyes were glowing yellow. She looked terrified. Cade held up his hands. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." The girl didn't answer. Her breathing was fast. Her arms shook. The scales on her body sharpened like tiny blades. Mira raised her weapon slightly. "Careful, she's defensive." But Cade didn't move. "She's scared, not dangerous." The girl backed away slowly, pressing herself against the stone. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Cade took one slow step forward. "My name is Cade. What's your name?" She didn't reply. Her eyes darted between his face and his hands. He knelt down, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay. You don't have to be afraid." And then something strange happened. Her scales began to glow, softly, like the stars in the night sky. The colors shifted with her emotions. Fear made them blue. Curiosity turned them green. Confusion made them flicker. Cade noticed it. "Your skin, it changes. It listens to your feelings." The girl blinked. Slowly, she stepped forward. Just one step. Mira whispered, "Cade, are you sure about this?" But Cade didn't answer. He gently reached out his hand toward the girl. She looked at it. Her fingers trembled. Then, without a word, she reached back. Their hands touched, and the ground beneath them began to rumble. A deep sound, like thunder from under the earth, shook the ruins. Symbols carved into the stones lit up with golden light. The vines burned away. A large circular door, hidden for centuries, slowly opened nearby. Cade stood up fast. Mira shouted, "What did you do?" But Cade wasn't afraid. He looked at the girl. Her scales had turned completely golden. Her eyes no longer glowed. They looked human. Tears fell from her eyes. She looked at Cade with something deeper than words, something ancient. And then, in a soft, broken voice, she whispered one word. "Sira." It was her name. Cade smiled gently. "Nice to meet you, Sira." Suddenly, a voice echoed from the glowing stone wall beside them. It was deep, mechanical, and full of warning. "The Tuchish Ahas Returnd. The last guardian. Hayes Awakens." Mira backed up. "This place is alive. The tech, it's not dead." Cade turned to her. "She's the key. Sira is connected to this place." The wind grew stronger. The clouds above spun in a slow circle. The ruins were waking up. And Sira, this scared, strange, shining girl, was at the center of it all. Cade looked at her hand, still warm in his. He didn't know who she really was. He didn't know what had just begun. But deep inside, he felt it. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The ruins whispered her name, and then a door opened. The glowing ruins stood still, but something was alive beneath the silence. The circular stone door that had opened last night was still there, wide, dark, and breathing a strange heat. The golden lights on the walls had dimmed, but not gone out. They pulsed slowly, like the heartbeat of something very old. Cade hadn't slept. He sat on a broken rock beside Syrah. She hadn't moved much. Her body was weak. Her golden skin was slowly fading back into its natural color, shimmering with soft blue and silver. She was quiet, watching, thinking. Cade finally spoke. "You opened the door. I didn't do anything. It was you." Syrah turned her head slowly. Her voice was dry and soft. "No, it was both of us." Cade looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She touched her chest. "I was born here. This planet knows me. But it only opened because of your touch." A chill went through Cade's spine. "Why me?" Syrah didn't answer. She looked back at the glowing door. Her eyes were far away now, lost in something she remembered but didn't want to say. Flashback. 10 years ago. She was younger, a child, surrounded by strange lights and metal walls. Voices shouted in a language half human, half alien. Syrah was strapped to a chair. Tubes were in her arms. Her skin flickered with fear. A shadow stood in front of her. A tall man with silver eyes and a cold voice. "Emotion is the key," he said. "If we control it, we control her." Her skin turned red. The machines around her beeped. Walls trembled. Scientists panicked. Then everything turned black. Back to present. Syrah gasped and clutched her chest. Cade leaned closer. "What's wrong?" "I remember now," she said, her voice shaking. "They made me to guard something. A gate. A weapon. A memory. I don't know." She stood up slowly and pointed to the door. "It's in there." Mira arrived from the camp. She looked tired and annoyed. "You two didn't come back," Mira said. "The others are nervous. This place is giving everyone bad dreams." Cade didn't look away from the door. "We have to go inside." Mira frowned. "Why? You don't even know what's in there." "She does," Cade said, nodding toward Syrah. "And whatever it is, it woke up because of us." Syrah stepped forward. As her bare feet touched the stone floor near the door, golden runes lit up beneath her. The ruins whispered her name. Syrah, softly, as if the stone itself remembered her. Even Mira looked scared now. Did the floor just speak? Syrah didn't blink. "It knows I've come back, but I'm not complete. Not without him." She turned to Cade. "You're the only one it listens to, because you're human." Cade raised an eyebrow. "What does being human have to do with this?" Syrah touched his arm. "They created me, using human DNA. A warrior who once lived here. He was kind, strong. And when he died, they took his essence and put it inside me." Cade pulled his arm back in shock. "So, unlike him, you carry the same spark," she said, "the same type of soul." He didn't understand it. Not fully. But the door ahead of them began to rumble again. Without thinking, Cade stepped forward. The heat grew. The air changed. They entered the dark doorway. Inside the vault. It wasn't a hallway. It was a tunnel made of living stone. The walls moved slightly, breathing, humming with ancient energy. Light crawled across the surface like fireflies. They walked carefully. Suddenly, a holographic figure appeared ahead. A tall alien woman, dressed in armor with 4 glowing eyes. She spoke. "To those who enter with the touch, welcome back. You are the first in 5,000 years." Syrah froze. The voice continued. "The last guardian fell, but his light was not lost. It passed into a child, half born of science, half born of grief. If you stand here now, you are the end of that grief, or the beginning of another war." The lights flickered. The hologram faded. Behind it, A chamber opened, filled with crystal mirrors, old weapons, floating data orbs, and a tall silver throne at the center. Syrah stepped closer. Cade saw her face changing again. Fear, wonder, pain. "What is this place?" he asked. Syrah whispered, "It's called the core, the memory of the planet. It stores everything, and it remembers me." As they walked in, a mirror glowed. Syrah looked into it and saw her childhood. She saw herself cry, scream, burn with fire. She turned away. "It hurts to remember," she said. Cade put a hand on her shoulder. "But maybe it's time to stop running from the past." Suddenly, the silver throne glowed. A deep voice said, "One bearer is incomplete. 2 may open the seal." A large symbol appeared on the floor between them, 2 hands touching, surrounded by fire. Syrah turned to Cade. "It's asking us to join again, like before." Cade hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "If we do this, it may show us everything. Who I really am, why you're here, what they tried to hide." They stood over the symbol. Their hands met once more. The chamber was still glowing, but Cade and Syrah were not. They had collapsed to the floor, side by side, breathing hard, shaking. Their minds were spinning with what they just saw, visions from a past neither one fully remembered. A war, a death, a promise. Cade wiped sweat from his forehead. His chest rose and fell in sharp gasps. Syrah lay beside him, curled up, eyes wide, skin flickering with unstable colors. Flashes of silver, red, violet, then black. She clutched her chest. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Memory storm aftermath. The chamber had shown them too much, too fast. Ancient memories had flooded into their heads, like drowning in time itself. Cade saw a version of himself dressed in old armor, standing on a burning field, holding a small girl wrapped in gold light. Syrah had seen her own face, terrified and full of sorrow, as if watching a ghost trapped in her soul. The room had gone silent after the visions. Now the air felt heavy, thicker, toxic. Syrah's breath begins to fade. Syrah tried to sit up, but her hands trembled. Her legs wouldn't move. Her face twisted with pain. Cade leaned closer. "Syrah, what's happening?" She shook her head. "I can't breathe." Her lips turned pale. Her skin began to crack. Tiny lines like glass breaking under pressure. Light leaked through the cracks. Cade grabbed her shoulders. "Stay with me. What do I do?" "The memories," she whispered, barely audible. "They broke something inside me." Her eyes rolled back. The ground shook. The walls pulsed red. Cade's voice cracked. "Syrah." Desperate attempt to save her. Cade didn't know what else to do. So he whispered her name. "Syrah, please." The moment her name left his mouth, her body pulsed with golden light. Just for a second. He said it again, this time closer to her ear. "Syrah." Another flash, stronger this time. Her skin began to seal again. The cracks shrank. The golden light returned, softly weaving through her body like threads repairing a tapestry. Her chest moved. Shallow breath. Then deeper. She opened her eyes. "You said my name," she whispered. "Yeah," Cade said, half laughing in relief. "It's the only thing I could think of. You pulled me back." She tried to sit up again. This time she could. Cade held her hand. Syrah looked down at their fingers, touched still glowing slightly. "It's real," she said. "The bond. It's more than energy. It's life." Mira arrives with a warning. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Mira rushed in, breathing heavily, gun drawn. "What's happening?" "The readings outside are spiking like crazy." Cade stood, helping Syrah up. "This place showed us something from before," Cade explained. "It nearly killed her." Syrah nodded slowly. "I think the planet is testing us. testing if we're ready. Mira looked around. For what? Sira pointed to the far wall. That. A second door was now glowing, a much larger one. Unlike the last, this one wasn't made of stone. It was metal. Alien metal. Silver black with strange roots wrapped around it, like veins from a giant heart. Above it, words appeared in golden letters. Only when pain becomes love, the core shall awaken. Mira whispered, "What does that even mean?" Sira turned to Cade. "It means we're not done." The silent hall. They moved forward together, deeper into the ruins. The walls of the next hallway were lined with strange metal sculptures. Some looked human, others twisted. Sira paused at one figure, a statue of a woman crying, holding a child made of glass. She touched the base, and a whisper filled the air. Project CRAP failed. Too emotional, too human. She pulled back quickly. "What was that?" Cade asked. She shook her head. "A memory. From the lab where I was made." Mira looked between them, confused. "You were a science experiment." Sira nodded. "I wasn't born. I was grown, designed to guard something ancient. My creators gave me emotions as weapons, but they feared them, so they locked me away." Cade's face darkened. "You were just a child." "They didn't care," she said. "But now, this planet does. It remembers me. It wants me to finish what I was made for." The trial begins. As they reached the metal door, it hissed open. Inside was a wide circular room, empty except for a floating orb in the center. It glowed red, spinning slowly. Sira stepped forward. The orb reacted to her instantly, flashing blue, then purple. A voice echoed from the orb. "Trial initiated. Emotion stabilization required." Before Cade could speak, energy beams wrapped around Sira and lifted her into the air. Her body froze midair. Her skin began flashing uncontrollably. Red for fear, black for rage, white for loss, green for hope, gold for connection. Cade shouted, "What's happening?" "Let her go." The orb replied coldly. "She must master all emotions, or be destroyed." Sira screamed, not from pain, but from too many feelings at once. She was drowning again. Final scene, the whisper that saved her again. Cade stepped into the light. His boots melted the floor. The air tried to push him back. He kept walking. "Sira," he called out. Her eyes were wide. She couldn't answer. He kept going. Then he whispered the words she wasn't expecting. "You're not alone anymore." That changed everything. Sira's body flared gold again, but this time, she controlled it. The orb stopped spinning. The energy beams released her. She fell gently into Cade's arms, safe, alive. The room went quiet. Then, from the walls, hundreds of golden runes lit up. One voice echoed clearly. "Trial complete. Core pathway unlocked." The stone floor still glowed under their feet, warm from the trial that nearly destroyed Sira. She was quiet now, resting against the wall of the chamber, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Cade stayed beside her, watching, waiting, half in awe, half in fear. Mira stood at the entrance of the room, her hand on her blaster. "I don't like this," she said. "The way this place reacts to her, it's not normal." Cade didn't answer right away. He was staring at Sira. Her body was calm, but her skin shimmered softly, like a sleeping star under her skin. The golden light hadn't faded this time. It had settled, balanced. "She's not dangerous," Cade said finally. "She's waking up, becoming what she was meant to be." Mira looked around. "And what exactly is that?" Cade sighed. "I don't think even she knows yet." Outside the chamber, the wind changes. They decided to leave the vault for a while. The air inside was thick with energy. It felt like staying too long would change you. As they stepped outside, the planet greeted them with silence. The trees swayed. The sky was calm. Still green, still glowing. But something was different. Syrah lifted her face toward the sky. Cade noticed. "You okay?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not a fake smile. Not a scared one. A real smile. Pure. For the first time in her life, Syrah felt something strange. Something warm. Joy. She didn't even know the word for it, but she felt it in her chest. It was small, gentle, but real. Cade saw it. "Hey, that's new." Syrah nodded. "I think I'm happy." And then, everything changed. The sky turns red. The clouds above froze. The air stopped moving. A low hum began, vibrating through the ground. And then, the sky turned red. Not just red, but burning, pulsing crimson. Mira shouted, "What the hell?" The trees around them bent backward. The wind reversed. Cade pulled Syrah close. "What's going on?" Syrah looked up, her smile gone, her skin flashing gold and violet. I didn't mean to," she cried. "I only felt happy." A beam of red light shot down from the clouds, hitting a tower in the distance. The ground cracked. Sirens began to scream, ancient sirens built into the ruins. Warning tones not heard for centuries. Symbols appeared in the sky. Not letters. Warnings. Glowing shapes in a forgotten language, rotating slowly in the clouds like a clock ticking down. Mira yelled over the noise. What did she activate? Syrah held her head, shaking. "I don't know. I didn't do anything bad. I just smiled." Cade grabbed her shoulders. "Syrah, listen. This planet responds to your emotions. What if joy is the final trigger?" She looked into his eyes, terrified. "Trigger for what?" The tower awakens. From miles away, a giant tower lit up. It rose higher than any mountain, built from metal, stone, and bone. At the top, something began to move. A satellite? A weapon? Nobody knew. The red beam from the sky hit its center. And then, it roared. A sound so loud and deep it shook every bone in their bodies. Syrah fell to her knees. "It's waking up the defenders," she whispered. Cade looked confused. "What defenders?" Syrah stared at the red sky. "The ancient ones, guardians of the planet, programmed to protect the core from invasion." Mira's eyes widened. "Invasion? From what?" Syrah looked at her hands. "From happiness, from love, from change." Cade frowned. "What do you mean?" Syrah looked at him, tears in her eyes. "I wasn't just made to guard the core. I was made to keep it sealed. My creators were afraid of emotion. They built me to stop it from spreading. But now that I've felt it, this place thinks I'm broken." Cade realized the truth. "So it's sending weapons to destroy you." The defenders rise. The ground shook. From beneath the earth, massive shapes began to climb out. Giant machines with 4 legs, glowing red eyes, and armor that looked alive. Each step they took burned the grass. Dozens of them rose from the hills, the trees, the ancient craters. They weren't just machines. They were living weapons, and they were heading straight toward the ruins. Mira raised her weapon. "We need to run. Now." Cade looked at Syrah. "Can you stop them?" She stood slowly, her skin flickering like a storm. "Maybe, but I'll need to feel more." Mira shouted. "More what?" Syrah answered softly. "More emotion." Cade takes a risk. Without thinking, Cade took her hands. He closed his eyes, and then he kissed her forehead. A gentle, human touch. Something she had never felt before. Something not made in a lab. Not part of her programming. Real. Syrah's whole body turned bright gold. The red sky cracked. A pulse of golden energy shot out from her body in all directions, stopping the defenders in their tracks. They froze mid-step. Some powered down. Others knelt. Mira looked around, shocked. What did you do? Cade looked at Syrah. I gave her a new emotion. Syrah smiled through tears. Love. The enemy arrived, and she became fire. The sky was still red. The ground was cracked. The ruins shook like they were breathing. But now, they weren't alone anymore. Up above, hidden inside the swirling red clouds, the enemy had arrived. It wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress in the sky. Black metal, long arms like claws, giant thrusters glowing blue. And inside it, something worse than machines. The voice from the sky. A voice echoed from the ship, cold and sharp like broken glass. Target located. HFY 09. Hybrid compromised. Execute the failsafe. Syrah's face went pale. Cade turned to her. What is HFY 09? She looked down at her hands. Her fingers were trembling. That's me. That's what they called me in the lab. Mira whispered. They tracked you here. Syrah nodded. They've always been watching. But now that I've awakened the core, they want to shut me down. Cade stepped in front of her. They'll have to go through me first. Syrah looked up at him, surprised. You don't have to do that. He smiled. I know. That's why it matters. The drop begins. From the massive ship, thousands of small black pods began to fall. They rained down like meteors, slamming into the ground with loud explosions. From each pod, soldiers stepped out. Not human, not quite alien. They were covered in armor, faceless, silent, moving like shadows with weapons made of light and sound. Mira loaded her gun. Guess we're not talking this out. Cade nodded. Stick close. But Syrah took a step forward, away from them. No, she said. I won't run anymore. Her skin began to glow again, this time brighter than before. Not just gold. Not just light. Flame. Syrah's transformation. As the first wave of soldiers approached, Syrah closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. She thought of pain. She thought of joy. She thought of Cade's kindness. She thought of freedom. And then, she became fire. Her body turned into living flame, golden and red, swirling like a storm. Her hair floated around her like sunlight. Her arms stretched wide as waves of heat rolled off her. The soldiers stopped. So did the wind. So did the birds. The entire planet seemed to pause. Cade shielded his eyes. Syrah. She looked like a star standing on Earth. The battle begins. The enemy charged forward, blasters ready, silent and brutal. Syrah raised one hand. A wall of flame erupted from the ground, swallowing the first wave of attackers in seconds. Their weapons melted. Their armor burned. But Syrah didn't move from her place. She didn't need to. She was the battlefield now. Another group circled behind. Cade and Mira opened fire. But just before they were overwhelmed, Syrah spun in a circle, flames bursting out in every direction like wings. She burned a perfect ring around her friends, keeping the enemies out. Mira stared in shock. She's controlling it. Perfectly. Cade nodded. She's not just reacting anymore. She's choosing. Inside the enemy ship. Far above, in the heart of the ship, a tall figure stood in front of a control screen. A woman, dressed in silver armor. 4 glowing eyes. 1 cybernetic arm. She watched Syrah's flames on the monitor and said, without emotion, "Activate the suppressor field." She was not meant to evolve. A soldier beside her asked, "What if she resists?" The woman didn't blink. "Then we erase her." Syrah's struggle. Back on the ground, Syrah dropped to her knees. The flames faded. Her body flickered. Something invisible had hit her. A new field had arrived. A quiet wave of energy from the ship above. Cold, invisible, pulling her power back inside her. She gasped. Her skin dimmed. Her fire vanished. Cade ran to her. "What's happening?" "They're shutting me down." Mira looked up. Some kind of anti-energy weapon. Sira nodded, weak. They built a backup plan, in case I became too strong. It's inside my blood. A kill code. Cade held her tight. We can fight it. Sira shook her head. Not this. This isn't something I can stop with fire. It's inside me. A command I can't disobey. A choice must be made. More soldiers arrived. Cade aimed his weapon. We're outnumbered. Mira shouted, We'll never outrun the field. Sira stood up again, barely standing. But her eyes were full of fire again. Not real flames, but anger. Not wild anger. Controlled. Focused. Human. She looked at Cade. There's one way, she said. I can absorb the suppressor field. Turn it inward. Burn it out. Mira frowned. Won't that kill you? Sira nodded. Maybe. But if I don't, they'll erase everything I've become. Cade grabbed her hand. There has to be another way. Sira smiled. There isn't, but you gave me something I never had. What's that? Cade whispered. A reason to fight for myself. She kissed his cheek, then stepped into the center of the ruins, and ignited herself, not with rage, not with fear, but with will. Her skin was cracking, and the planet began to die. The sky wasn't red anymore. Now it was white, blinding and endless, like a sun had swallowed the heavens. The energy that Sira released in the last blast had torn through clouds, cracked open mountains, and melted the air itself. The defenders were gone. The alien soldiers had fallen. But peace didn't return. Instead, everything began to fall apart. The silence after the fire. Cade stood in the center of the ancient ruins, coughing from the smoke. Ash floated down like snow. Mira was limping, her armor scorched, hair burned. The trees beyond the hills had turned to glass. And Sira was still glowing, hovering in the air, surrounded by flames so bright they looked white. Her hair floated, her eyes blank. Her skin pulsed with cracks. Thin glowing lines spreading like lightning across her arms, her legs, her face. Cade ran forward. Sira. She didn't hear him. Her body shook, like something inside was breaking out. Then, suddenly, her feet hit the ground. Hard. And the entire planet groaned. The earth begins to fracture. Below them, the ground split. Long, jagged cracks spread through the stone, reaching into valleys and forests miles away. Lava hissed from under the planet's skin. The wind turned hot and dry. Birds fell from the sky, and animals ran from burning forests. Cade turned in a slow circle. The planets. Dying. Mira scanned her device. The energy core under this place. It's destabilizing. Her release messed with its balance. Cade looked at Sira, horrified. She didn't mean to. Mira shook her head. I don't think this planet was ever meant to feel emotion. And now that it has, it can't survive it. Sira begins to fade. Sira dropped to her knees. Her skin was full of glowing cracks now, like she was made of broken glass holding fire inside. Her breathing was slow. Painful. Cade knelt beside her. You have to stop. Please. Pull it back. I can't, she whispered. It's too deep now. I opened something I don't understand. Something old. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't want this. I just wanted to feel. Cade held her hand. You're not a weapon anymore. You're a person. You deserve to feel. She looked at him. Really looked. And then, she collapsed. Inside the planet, the core awakens. Far beneath the ground, in chambers older than memory, the core of the planet began to awaken. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't alive. It was something in between. A massive pulsing heart of crystal and metal, shaped like a flower that never opened. It throbbed with red energy, then gold, then pure white. And at the center, something began to grow. A shape, a seed. The prophecy revealed. Back on the surface, the sky cracked with thunder. But it wasn't natural thunder. It was a voice. The prime ember has reached full bloom. The cycle repeats. The creator returns. Mira looked up. Who keeps saying that? What is the prime ember? Cave stood still. It's her. Syrah opened her eyes. Weak, barely alive. I was never just a protector, she whispered. I was a signal, a key, a doorway. She pointed to the center of the ruins, where a golden beam shot upward from a cracked stone ring. And now, the doorway is open. The heartstone appears. As the beam faded, something rose from the ground. A stone, black, smooth, and glowing from within like a slow heartbeat. The heartstone, the core of Therion, the planet's brain and soul. Syrah crawled forward toward it. Cade tried to stop her. Don't. It's too much. She shook her head. It called to me. I can feel it. She touched it. And everything stopped. The vision shared. A pulse of energy spread out. Cade was pulled into her mind. They stood together in a world of stars. Cyrus past, and his. Together, they saw. A warrior from Earth, long ago, who saved a dying alien child. That child grew up and created a protector using his DNA and memory. The protector was named Syrah. The planet itself was alive, built as a sanctuary for emotion, but shut down when fear took over. Syrah was its last chance. Cade looked at himself, reflected in the face of the ancient warrior. He was a reincarnation, or maybe something left behind. A spark carried forward. You were never chosen, the vision said. You were the one who chose. Syrah's final gift. Back in the real world, Syrah's body shook again. The cracks reached her chest. She looked at Cade one last time. If I go into the Heartstone, I can heal it. Cade shook his head. No, you'll die. I'm already fading, she said, smiling softly. But if I go, the planet lives. And you live. Cade grabbed her hand. Then we go together. But she let go, walked to the stone, turned back one last time, and said, "Thank you for showing me who I really was." Then she stepped into the Heartstone. The world exploded with light. The last emotion she felt saved the galaxy. The world was quiet. Too quiet. The winds had stopped. The sky had returned to blue. The ground no longer shook. The cracks were gone. The Heartstone stood in the center of the ruins, silent, dark, unmoving. And Syrah was no longer there. She had gone inside. She had healed the planet. And she had disappeared. The aftermath. Cade stood alone, his knees pressed to the dirt, hands trembling. His chest hurt, not from wounds, from loss. She was gone. The girl who once feared her own smile, the girl who changed the sky with laughter, the girl who burned to protect him. She had become part of the world she was born to guard. He placed his hand on the cold surface of the Heartstone. "You saved everyone but yourself," he whispered. Mira stood a few steps behind him, her voice low. "We should go. The ship from command is almost here." But Cade didn't move. He didn't want to leave her behind. He couldn't. A new threat rises. Far above them, beyond the clouds, something stirred in space. A giant crack of black lightning tore open the stars, and from it came something no one expected. Not a ship, not a god, a being. Vast, golden skin wrapped in black armor, eyes like burning moons, hair that flowed like rivers of night, 10 arms, no face, a presence that made time freeze. It stepped out of the stars as if they were glass and began descending slowly toward the planet. Mira's eyes widened. What is that?" The ship from command turned and fled. It couldn't fight something this size. The being's voice echoed across the galaxy. "The prime ember has returned to its cradle. The human has touched what was forbidden. Judgment begins now." Cade stands alone. Cade stared up at the sky as the being descended. He was just one man, one soldier, but he didn't back down. He walked to the center of the ruins, to the Heartstone, and placed both hands on its surface. "Sira," he whispered, "I know you're still here, somewhere." Silence. The being above reached out a hand. Energy gathered at its palm, enough to erase a world. Mira screamed, "Cade, move." But he didn't. He kept talking. "I believed in you. I still do. And I know you felt the same." He leaned in close to the stone. "I don't need you to come back for me. I just need you to remember who you are." A single tear fell and touched the Heartstone, the final emotion. Deep inside the core of the planet, light returned. A small ember began to glow again. Not red, not gold, but pink, soft, gentle, alive. The color of love. It grew brighter, warmer, stronger. The walls of the core shook. Then, Sarah's voice returned. "Cade." Sira reawakens. The Heartstone cracked down the center. A blinding light poured out, and from it, Sira stepped forward. Not made of fire this time. Not glowing. Just human, alive. Her skin was smooth, her eyes warm, her smile soft. But inside her pulsed the entire planet's heart. She had become something more than herself. She was no longer just a protector. She was the soul of Zarian. The final stand. The ancient being stopped mid-strike. Its many arms lowered. It stared at Sira, then spoke. "You defied your design. You chose your own path. That cannot be allowed." Sira raised her hand. "No," she said calmly. "I didn't defy anything. I became more than my creators allowed. I became what they feared." Cade stood beside her. "And what's that?" She smiled at him. "Free." The ancient being screamed, a sound of rage and fear. It sent its energy down in a final, galaxy-ending strike. But Sira was faster. She didn't throw fire. She didn't scream. She simply took Cade's hand and felt love, trust, hope. And then she released it. A wave of pure emotion blasted upward, not to destroy, but to heal. The being stopped. Its body cracked. Its armor broke. And from inside it, a human-like shape fell, weak, silent. It was no god. It was the first scientist who had created her. Old, lost, empty. Sira caught him gently. He looked into her eyes. "You were never meant to survive." Sira nodded. "And yet here I am." She let him fall into sleep. Not death, just rest. Peace returns. The stars closed. The sky turned silver. The trees began to grow again. The animals returned, and life restarted. Sira sat beside Cade on a hill. Mira walked toward them with a soft smile. "Command says you're both heroes." Cade looked at Sira. "She's more than that," he said. Sira smiled. "I'm just me."